We welcome you to this class today presented by Kathryn Grant. Today's class is a case study using FamilySearch historical records to reconstruct families from English parish registers. We appreciate Kathryn for taking her time to prepare and present this class, and we will now turn the time over to her. Kathryn.
Well, everybody, welcome to this exciting class today. So glad that you could join us. And I know Susan is here for the first time, she mentioned in the chat. And to anybody else who's joining us today, welcome, welcome. We're so glad you're with us. I do want to comment that this class is being done by request of class members. And it's actually quite a bit more technical than we usually do in these Sunday classes. I'm going to explain a little bit more how it came about, but I did want to say that up front. And I also want to say, though, that I'm going to try really hard to make it very clear and very understandable, even though it is more technical. But I did want to say that up front so that if you go, oh, good grief, is every class like this? No, every class is not like this. This is a specialized class, again, done at request of some class members, but I do believe it will be helpful to people who are doing this type of English research. So before we dive into the class, I wanted to announce we've got something very exciting coming up. So Rayanne can speak to this because she and I kind of powwowed over this. It was time on August 6th to start our basic family search series over again. And I emailed Rayanne as one of our curriculum people. Rayanne, I hope I got your title right. She helps with the Sunday curriculum, does an amazing job, as you guys know. And I said, Rayanne, I'm feeling uncomfortable about starting the basic series again. And I don't know what's going on and I don't know what to do. And Rayanne gave me very wise counsel. She said, you know what? I found, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but she said, in effect, I found at times like this, it really helps to be still and to listen for inspiration. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's the best advice she could have given me. So I kind of drew back a little bit and tried to pray and be sensitive to the Spirit. But then I also looked at what was going on in the family history community and the needs that I saw. And some of the biggest things that come up are that family history seems like a black box for a lot of people. And unfortunately, in recent years, there's been kind of, okay, for many years, it was assumed that you kind of had to have professional level skills to do genealogy. Well, that's absolutely not true. And it put a lot of people off family history. But then there was a backlash where people said, oh, no, you don't need anything. Just dive in, just do whatever, and it doesn't matter. Well, that didn't work so well either because we ended up with mangled families in FamilySearch. And one of the biggest reasons is that people jump to unjustified conclusions. And there's other things. So in my degree at BYU, when I was studying, I took some classes on building thinking skills. And I thought maybe that kind of thing could apply to family history. And the more I thought about it, the better it seemed. So bottom line is August 6th, we are going to beta test a new class on thinking skills for family historians. Would love to have you join us and would love to get your feedback on that so that we can improve it. And if you think it should be added to the curriculum, or if you just go, nah, don't bother, maybe you'll think that, once was enough. So we really want your feedback on that. The second need that I have seen a lot, this is a question that comes up in almost every family search community, maybe everyone that I participate in, and that is, how do I learn? I want to learn. I want to become capable and competent. How do I do that? And so on August 13th, we'll have another presentation on learning skills for family historians. So hopefully that will be helpful for those that are starting out and want to know, what do I really have to do to learn to be successful? And again, I'm not talking about professional credentials or anything like that. I'm talking about just ordinary people like you and me that want to learn to do a good job and don't need that professional certification. So after those 2 classes are done on August 20th, we'll pick up with our basic Family Search series again. As for today, this is what we've got on the agenda. First of all, we'll just give a quick background on why we're even doing this class. Then we'll talk about how we did the search. Then we'll talk about how to download the results and how to clean up and organize them. And if points 2, 3, and 4 don't make sense yet, they will probably make more sense after we do point number 1. So why are we even doing this case study? Well, it all started, and I don't know if Cheryl's on our call today. I actually don't see her, but a wonderful participant in our class named Cheryl Brown offered to do a discovery experience demo with me. And so, as many of you may remember from class or from earlier classes, whenever we do a discovery experience, it starts by asking the person their goal. What do they want to accomplish? Well, Cheryl's goal was she was at a dead end on this Joseph Benton on her line. So she wanted to find his parents, and she gave me the PID. So first thing we did, and this was all, there's a recording of this if you want to watch it. It's, oh gosh, I would say go back. I was going to try to guess at the date, but I don't think I'd better. But if you go to our virtual classes archive page on the BYU Family History Library website, you'll find the recording of the discovery experience. So the first thing I did in preparing for the experience was, what all of us would probably do is get familiar with at least what we already know so that we could move to what we didn't know. So here was Joseph Benton on that PID that Cheryl had given me. And you notice that he's born about 1807. He's of Willingham, Cambridgeshire. In case you're not familiar with this, for those of you who are maybe newer to family history, and by that I mean maybe within the last 20 years, back in the olden days, back in the 20th century, before the days of the internet, when we were working on people and we had a residence, but we did not have a known birthplace, we were taught, and by the way, this is no longer recommended, but at the time we were taught that you could use the residence as a birthplace, as a likely birthplace, and you put the word of in front to signal that you didn't know the birthplace, but you think there's probably a pretty good chance that it's correct. So that appears to be what happened here. Whoever found this record knows that they lived in Willingham, Cambridgeshire. They think they were probably born there, but they're not positive. So this is what we know at this point in time. Scrolling down the person page to the family members section, we see that Joseph has a wife named Phoebe. We've got an exact marriage date and place. We've got a bunch of kids. We have no parents, which is why Cheryl wanted to trace backward and see if we could find them. Well, given the fact that we had some pretty good starting information, I thought as I was preparing for the discovery experience, why not just do a search? So I went to FamilySearch Historical Records and completed the search form, Joseph Benton. I just am going to say, let's assume he's born in Willingham. He was listed with a birth year of 1807, but in England, kids could be christened up to several years after the birth. In fact, sometimes I've even found them christened as adults, but that's very, very rare. And so usually I find them christened within, say, 4 years of the birth. It's kind of rare for it to happen beyond that. So I put that span in. I checked that I wanted records prioritized that show the principal, Joseph as the principal, which just means he's the guy that the thing is happening to. So on a christening record, he's the guy getting christened. On a marriage record, he's the guy getting married. I didn't want the witnesses or the parents on the christening or whatever, or at least I didn't want them at the top of the list. And I also checked that for the record type, I wanted births, baptisms, and christenings. Oh, and I just realized, by the way I got these little options down here is under record, add record options, I clicked principal and I clicked type. You can choose these additional options to help get better search results. And so I clicked principal and got this little form, and I clicked type and got this form, and it has more options, but I just wanted birth, baptism, and christening. And then I clicked search. Well, lo and behold, look what came up. We got a christening for a Joseph Benton in Willingham within the right parameters. But I've learned by experience that it is so important to have context, because a lot of times if you don't have the necessary context, you can jump to conclusions that lead you down the wrong path. And so the first question that came to my mind is, does Joseph have any siblings? In other words, do John and Mary have other children? Could I try to reconstruct those families so that I felt like I knew them better and so that I had better context? For instance, what if there was John and Mary are very common names, and Benton was a common name in this parish in Willingham? There could very easily be another John and Mary having kids at the same time. And so how am I going to get a clear picture of these families so that I enter the information accurately in Family Tree? Well, the first thing that came to my mind is I need to broaden my search. I need to kind of cast a wider net. So this is how I did the wider search. And by the way, this is all preparation before doing the discovery experience with Cheryl. And the reason that this even came up actually is that I showed a spreadsheet in the discovery experience, and quite a few people said, how on earth did you get that spreadsheet? So we're now walking through the steps that I took to make that spreadsheet. And if you didn't see the class and don't remember the spreadsheet, it doesn't matter. Just start with us from where we are. So to search for possible siblings, notice that on the search form this time, I left the first name blank because I don't know the names of the possible siblings. I do know the last name. They're all going to be Bentons, and I would all expect them to be born in Willingham. What do I put for the date range? Because I have no clue if Joseph has had siblings, and if he did, if he's the oldest or the youngest or someplace in between. So just based on his birth year of 1807, I just went a few decades before and a few decades after, totally arbitrary. But I wanted to cast a wide net so that I could hopefully pick up all of his family members. And then I was definitely looking for children of a woman named Mary and a man named John Benton. And I wanted to, again, to emphasize that I wanted the principal on the record. I wanted the kids getting christened, and I wanted the baptism, birth, and christening records. So when I did the search, look what we got. It looks really good, but John and Mary, like we said, are common names. There's a little bit of a spread on these dates. We've got 1814, we've got 22, we've got 1818. So are these kids in the same family? What if the 22 actually belongs in a different set of kids? We can't tell from this screen. So another thing we notice is there are duplicate records. Look at James, 17 February 22, 17 February 22. This happened a lot in English records, and I don't know if it happened in other countries. I would kind of suspect that it did. But one reason is that when FamilySearch was microfilming records to be indexed, they couldn't always tell if they were microfilming a duplicate. And so they just did everything because they didn't want to miss anybody, and that makes a lot of sense. But then we ended up with these duplicate records. Finally, the records aren't in chronological order, which makes it hard to see patterns, which would enable us to know these families. So we need a better way to view and to analyze this data. And while we're at it, should we broaden our search to include other Bentons? So for Cheryl, these could be the discovery of other family members that either she could verify in Family Tree or might even need to be added or at least organized into families if they were all, little bits and pieces from christening records. So let's cast a wider net and search for more Bentons. So once again, I'm leaving the first name blank because I don't have any clue what these other people's first names are. I did a little different thing on the last name this time. Some of you might be familiar with the fact that FamilySearch allows us to use what are called wildcards. Wildcards are just characters that stand for actual alphabetic characters. Here you see we've got a question mark. A question mark is a wildcard on FamilySearch. I need to say for sure on FamilySearch because other websites may not use wildcards the same way. But on FamilySearch, the question mark stands for one unknown character. If you use an asterisk, a star, it stands for 0 to infinitely many characters. I didn't want infinitely many characters. The reason I put the question is because in the search results, I noticed that sometimes Benton was spelled T-O-N, sometimes it was spelled T-E-N, and I wanted to pick up all those results. But I also noticed that some of the results that I did in my initial searches included Bentley and different names that were close, but were obviously not right. So because of that, I also clicked this exact checkbox saying, look, this is what I want exactly. I want any name that starts with B-E-N-T, then with any character afterward, and that ends in an N, and I don't want all the other close stuff like Bentley or Benningham or whatever. I kept it in Willingham, and the year range, I actually extended it. You might remember earlier I had been looking for kids from 1795 to I think 1830. And here I thought, well, if we're looking for other family members, let's back that up a little bit and let's go to the first helpful English census that actually gives full names of the family. Censuses before 1841 only gave head of household. And so I wanted to extend the search up to the first full name census. And I didn't restrict it by any spouse, parents, or other person. And here is what we got. We got 73 results, which actually sounds pretty good for trying to reconstruct families. That might be, 5 or 6 family groups. But I wanted to point out that here's a little tip. When you run a search in FamilySearch historical records, by default, only 20 show on the page. And I wanted the ability to just scan them all on one page, even before I downloaded, because I wanted to do a sanity check, see if there was any weird stuff showing up or whatever. So if you scroll to the bottom of the page, there's actually this little drop down. And the drop down, although it defaults to 20, you can choose fewer at 10 or you can choose more. And so I chose 100 because that would let me see and scan through all 73 results. So now that I've got my set of results that I want to download, I'm ready to actually do the download so that I can put them into my spreadsheet and organize them. Well, downloading, at least for me, is not where I would have expected. It's under preferences. So normally preferences, I expect that to be where I set defaults for my program. I don't expect to download stuff for that from there. So it took me a while to find, but that's where it is. So when you click preferences at the top of your search results, this panel opens up. We don't have to worry about the first 4 items, except I've never tried the language option. So I have to admit, I do not know how that affects the export results, if it even does. It may just affect the display. I know that these first 3 options only affect the way that your information is displayed in the results. So what we want is this export section. So let's make that a little bit bigger so we can kind of see what's going on. You've got these 5 choices of what to export, and it defaults to XLSX, which is Microsoft Excel's current version, the current format for their current version of Excel. I didn't say that very well, sorry, but I hope you know what I mean. XLS is for Microsoft Excel prior to 2007. And I know many of us are running older versions of Excel. So if you want to, you can choose this older version if that applies to you. XLSX probably is going to work for most people. But just a comment on these other ones. CSV stands for comma separated values. What that will give you is just a text file with all this information in it, except everything is separated by commas. So you've got like Sarah Norris, comma, Willingham, comma, blah, 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 comma. You might be asking, why on earth would I ever want that? Well, one reason is that a lot of spreadsheet programs will read comma separated files, CSV files. So suppose that you use Quattro Pro, an old spreadsheet or some other kind of spreadsheet that might not, well, Quattro Pro actually does read XLS files. But let's suppose for the sake of argument that you, or the sake of illustration, that you use some spreadsheet program that doesn't read these other things, but it does read CSVs. That's a reason why you might want to download CSV. TSV just is tab separated values instead of commas. It separates all the little pieces of data with tabs. And ODS is for those of you who might be using OpenOffice, either Libre OpenOffice or Apache's OpenOffice. And I want the largest number of results here. Well, I shouldn't say unfortunately. This drop down is the same as the other drop down that we just looked at the bottom of the page. So you can only download 100 at a time. But for most people, that's probably going to be sufficient. And if you want to download more, you just have to run separate searches and download them separately. Or actually, I bet, okay, you know how the search page, I haven't actually tried this. I'm just kind of going on supposition here. I am betting that if you have multiple pages of search results and you navigate to, say, the second page, then if you bring up this export thing and say 100, then it's probably going to download the 100 that we're showing on that second page. I would be very surprised if that's not the case. So after you have chosen your parameters for exporting, you click Export Results. So then the question is, where do I find those exported results? I have never seen an exception to this. If any of you have, please post it in the chat. But every machine I've ever used, whether it's been a Mac or a PC or Windows 7 or 10 or 11 or whatever, it downloads it to, guess what? The download folder. And so you just click your download folder and then it will show up on your most recently downloaded items. So this is what it looks like, FS for FamilySearch. It gives the file name actually of the date and time that you downloaded. So it's not necessarily user-friendly as far as reading the file name, but there you go. And that's how you can recognize it'll start with FS and have this date string on it. So when you open the file, let's talk about what you get and how to clean up and organize the results. This is what I got when I opened that downloaded file. Not the most user-friendly thing to look at, is it? It's going to take some organization and cleaning up to make this into the more readable spreadsheet that we saw in the discovery experience a few weeks ago. I wanted to give you a tip that I learned the hard way by not doing this. And that is, once you've downloaded that file and opened it, then I would immediately save it with a different name so that you retain the original, just in case, like I have done, you mess up the new spreadsheet beyond repair and you need to go back to the original. If you save the original copy, it's super simple. You just delete the messed up one and you start again. So I would very strongly recommend saving the file with a different name so you've got your original as it was, and then you can work in your working copy. I did want to point out that the way FamilySearch downloads the results is it will put any burials at the top, then it will list all the marriages, then it will list all the christenings. They are not in any kind of date order. It's just burials, marriages, and christenings. So a couple of things I wanted to point out at the top of the search form. FamilySearch automatically inserts a link that lets you repeat the search. If you click this link, it will open up FamilySearch historical records and run the search for you. How cool is that? Because otherwise you might forget, like, oh, what did I do to get this spreadsheet? I know I probably would. And so you've got that link right there, very helpful. And then notice they put the same date stamp in. Just to break this down, this particular file was generated in the year 2023 in the 7th month. So it's kind of backwards from what we usually do, right? 7th month on the 23rd day. The time is 18, they do it in military time, or I don't know if there's another name for that, but you know what I mean, where you don't start over at 1 o'clock with 1 p.m., but you keep counting 13, 14, 15. So 18 is actually what we normally call 6 p.m. So this was downloaded at 6:20 p.m. and 26 seconds, if that makes a difference to anybody. But notice that's what they use to generate the file name as well. I didn't find that whole thing particularly helpful, so I like to put in a kind of better title at the top. So I put in the topic of my research. It's Benton's in Willingham, just as simple as that. I put in a user-friendly string, especially if I'm going to be sharing this with somebody, which I was planning to give this to Cheryl in our discovery experience. So I say it was downloaded from FamilySearch on this date. This is the date span, and here's the link to repeat the search. I'm going to stop now because I see that we've got some Q&As. Susan asks, not having seen the video for the discovery experience, how did you get to the search for possible siblings search box? I have never seen that option. Oh my goodness, what a good question, Susan. Let me just back up to that place where I was searching for the siblings. So there isn't actually a place called search for possible siblings. What I did was I went to search on the top menu here at FamilySearch, and then you get a drop down and the first option is records. When you go to that page for records, you get an initial search form, but it's actually smaller than this. At the bottom of that search form, there's going to be a thing that says more options. When you click more options, it expands this search form. So then with the expanded search form, that's when I started filling out this stuff. And I apologize, I should have said this earlier. These are not actually side by side in the real search form, they're stacked. And so here's the search form, you've got the names, you've got the life events. This piece right here actually shows up under this, but I had to put it over here so it would fit on the slide. So Susan, I hope that helps answer the question. If it doesn't, please feel free to ask a follow-up question. And at the end of class, I could actually go into FamilySearch and show, exactly where to click and how to get to this. Okay, we're to deleting empty and unneeded columns. Probably noticed there was a lot of stuff in that spreadsheet. Not all of it is going to be relevant to what we're doing, where we're trying to reconstruct families. For instance, column A contains a score. There are and what it is a score of is how well it matches the original search parameters. Now that could be very useful in some instances, but here it really isn't. The link to the actual source, the ARC ID, I have no clue what ARC stands for. Somebody from FamilySearch could probably tell you, but I know by clicking on this, I get taken to a page that actually shows the source. But again, for this particular spreadsheet, I didn't really feel like I needed that. I didn't really care whether the image was a JPEG or what format it was. In this particular instance, I didn't care about the batch number. Again, there's instances where that would be helpful. And so others, like the relationship column was empty, so that didn't do me any good. The residence column was empty, so even if you scroll down, it was empty. So basically, just for my sanity, just to get rid of the stuff so that I had a smaller spreadsheet to deal with, I deleted these columns that I did not need. And again, remember, we've got our original spreadsheet if we need to go back to it. Here's a little tip if you're not familiar with doing this in Excel. If I had deleted column A, guess what it would have done? It would, all of column A, it would have deleted the cute heading that we made, and that's not what we wanted. So if you want to delete some columns, but only delete part and not maybe some stuff at the top, you actually can select all the data that you want, and then when you click delete, you're going to have a choice to either delete the whole column or just delete the selection and shift the cells over. So that's what I did. I chose the option to shift the cells over so that it wouldn't delete the header. And then for the columns where there wasn't anything I wanted to save at the top, I just clicked the column and deleted the whole column. And actually, I think that's showing up here. I think it's this one. So you select the column and then just click delete and it deletes the column. I say I think because I always feel safer if I actually click it and see that it does what I want it to do. But I'm like 99% sure that that's the button for deleting the column that you have selected. Okay, another thing on the spreadsheet is you notice that these names are all cut off. These dates are cut off. The place is cut off because the download put the columns at a default width, which is actually quite small and not very helpful if you want to read the whole stuff. I mean, it worked pretty well for 1775, but not for the rest of it. But if I were to use, as some of you may know, Excel has a feature where you can automatically make it adjust to the widest piece of data in the column. Well, I didn't want the widest piece for Willingham, Cambridgeshire, England, United Kingdom, because that's way long. And I want to make this spreadsheet as compact and as easy to use as possible. So just me personally, this is not obligatory. This is not required. Just if you're like me and you want narrower columns or abbreviated stuff, this is how you can do it. So I wanted to do a search and replace for Willingham and replace it with something much shorter. So the way you do that is you click Home, you click Editing, you click Find and Select, and you click Replace. And this again is all going to be in this presentation in the slide deck, and we'll give you the link at the end so you can just navigate to this slide and follow these instructions. When you click Replace, you get this dialog box here. And so I told my spreadsheet, I want you to find this long place name and I want you to replace it with just the name of the parish and the abbreviation for the standard abbreviation for Cambridgeshire, which is CAMBS. And then I click replace all and it's all replaced. Now I'm going to do the auto column thing because I've got this nice shorter place name in here. And you're going to love how easy this is to make the columns adjust to the size of the data in them. The first thing you do is click this little triangle guy up here to select all the data on the spreadsheet. Then again, you click Home if you're not already on the Home tab. Then you go over to Format, and that is in the cell group. And then when you click Format, you're going to get this drop down and you choose Auto Fit Column Width. And again, that makes the column be as wide as the largest piece of data in that column. And this is what we end up with. Doesn't this look a lot better? The names are readable. The dates are readable. You see, there's my place, Willingham Cams. I don't have this huge, big, long place name that I have to deal with. So now I'm feeling like this spreadsheet is getting cleaned up. It's getting more manageable. Well, now that we've gone this far, we want to use marriages as the framework for organizing the families. Do you remember we had burials, marriages, and christenings? All the christenings are going to belong in a family. They're going to belong to a couple. And the burials should also, whenever somebody dies, their part of a family. And so the first thing I did in this spreadsheet is I decided I would clean up the marriages. And here's how I did that. First of all, I noticed there were a boatload of duplicates. Well, we don't need those. They just clutter the spreadsheet, so we want to get rid of those. Also, there was this really weird one down here, and I thought, what the heck is going on with that? September 0020, it looks like this person got married in 20 AD, and I very much doubt that that's the case. So this was a case where I was really glad I had that original spreadsheet. I went back to it, and you remember that ARC column that had the links to the source? I clicked that link, and it took me to the source, and guess what the date was? 20th of September. So it had been misindexed without the year. And apparently the system interpreted the 20th of September to be the year, but it really wasn't. It was the day. So because it was out of our date range, I just deleted this entry. If Cheryl ever wanted to go back, she could increase her search range and go back to earlier entries. When I removed the exact duplicates, I ended up with a bunch of duplicates that looked like they were the same person, but they didn't have the same date. So notice down here, most of these couples have 2 dates for their marriage, but it is extremely unlikely, for example, that there were 2 Elizabeth Bentons who both married a guy named John Ambers, one on the 15th of October and the other on the 23rd. That's almost astronomically impossible. Well, if you know anything about English marriage customs at the time, you had 2 options if you wanted to get married in England at that time. You could pay for a rather expensive license, which meant you could get married at your earliest convenience, or you could ask your clergyman to call banns or publish banns. What are banns? Well, banns comes from an Old English word which just means proclamation. And basically what happened is the couple would go to their clergyman and say, we want to get married and we can't afford a license. And so we want you to call the banns, please. And so each Sunday for 3 Sundays, the clergyman would stand up in church and he would say, John Ambers and Elizabeth Benton desire to be united in holy matrimony. If anybody knows any reason why this couple should not proceed with their marriage, let us know, basically. That's paraphrase, obviously. But usually nobody spoke up, of course, but once in a while somebody would object. And then, of course, they had to deal with that. But what I've noticed in indexed records is that very often band dates were misindexed as marriage dates. And that is where we most likely got these earlier dates. So that means the latest date is probably the marriage date, but if you can, it's better to verify that on the image, because when you bring up the image, it'll say if it's bands, and it'll also have 3 weeks. It'll say like bands read on October 15th, October such and such, October such and such. And then sometimes on the band's record, they would say when the marriage actually took place. Sometimes the marriage record would be separate. It just depends on how the records were kept. So in this case, what I would need to do is either go verify that latest date, make sure it's the marriage date, but if I couldn't, I would just delete the earlier dates. Now we come to something unfortunate that I discovered when creating this spreadsheet, because I'd actually never tried this before. I wanted to sort by date. Well, I've tried with like modern dates and it worked. So I fully expected that 1800s dates would work. And I tried to sort and they didn't. And they were an ugly mess. And I could tell it wasn't working. And so I Googled and found out that Excel and Google, for whatever reason, I guess the developers are not family historians, because they have put a limitation on the spreadsheet that you cannot sort dates with their date sort function before 1900. Normally, there's a date sort function. You just select an area, say sort by date, and it does. But on this spreadsheet, you can't. So because of these dates. So you've got your choice. You can either order them manually, which is what I chose to do, and you'll see why in a minute. Or if you Google, there's these really complicated, crazy formulas that you can add to your spreadsheet. And I was like, okay, I know that if I took enough time, I could figure that out, but I really don't feel like it. And so I chose to just do it manually. For those of you who are maybe Excel whizzes and you're like, oh, formula, no problem. Yeah, I'm right there. Well, then, yeah, Google the formula and please teach me how to do it. But I just chose to do it manually. So here is what we ended up with after I deleted all those bands dates and duplicate dates and sorted them manually in date order. We've got Sarah Benton, married on this date, in Willingham to John Rogers. We've got John, married to Mary, etc., etc. Now we can use these couples as a framework for sorting out the children, for organizing the families. I just started out with a few blank lines, but of course, if you get more children than that for the couple, you would just add more rows. So the next thing is I wanted to go down and get rid of the duplicates in the christening. They had a ton of duplicates just like the marriages did. We're not going to walk through that because it's basically the same process. Well, not the same as the bands. That was kind of a special case for marriages. But notice we've got Joseph Hayden Benton, 31 July 1839. Oops, there he is again. We've got Alfred, 8th of June. Oops, there he is again. So I just went through manually and just deleted all the duplicates. And then I was ready to do one last improvement to the spreadsheet. So again, you notice as I said earlier, sorry, let me do a take two on there. As I said earlier, I've got to get the clutter out of the spreadsheet because otherwise I just feel like I can't think clearly or it's just too much to deal with. It's too long and too complicated. And so I decided, okay, the original spreadsheet has a birth columns. It has christening columns. It has marriage columns. It has death columns. It has burial columns. Why could I not just have one event column and put all the events in there and then have an event type and then get rid of all these other columns? I actually didn't know if that would work when I tried this for Cheryl's spreadsheet. And so I thought, what the heck? We'll just give this a shot, see if it works. And I was actually a little surprised and delighted to find out that it seemed to work pretty well. So this is what I ended up doing. I went to the first column after the names and I inserted a new column here and I called it event type. That's going to be marriage, burial, or christening. Then I inserted another column and I called it event date, which obviously is the event date. Then I started by moving all the marriage information into these new columns that I had created. Then I thought, you probably remember, I'm not going to scroll back, but the parents, or excuse me, the spouse on the marriage record was clear out here in column P. So it was way, way far from the name of the other person that was part of the marriage. So I thought, why not just put the name of the couple here? So I grabbed the name from column P and put it back here. So we've got the couple, Sarah Benton and John Rogers, John Benton and Mary Harris, etc., etc. Then I felt like the spreadsheet was in good enough shape that I could start putting the kids under the parents that they seemed to belong to. I figured I would find out pretty quickly if they didn't belong because there would be some weird inconsistencies, like big gaps between children, 10 years or 15 years before children that were born to John and Mary. Or there could be children that were born too close together. So suppose there was John and Mary, and they had one kid in the 26th, christened the 26th of March, 1800, and then another one christened April 1st, April 1800. And you're like, wait a second, that's probably another John and Mary's kids. And so I thought at least this is a good place to start by putting the kids in where they logically seemed to fall. So there was a christening for a John Benton in 1800, and these were his parents listed on the christening record, and it was a really good fit for this John Benton and Mary Harris, about not quite 6 months after the marriage. That tended to happen sometimes back then. And so, the couple would have to get married because she was pregnant. And then we found the next kid born about 2 years later, the next one about 4 years later. But this is an interim screenshot, so obviously I haven't put all the kids there. But as I kept going down the list, I might have found another one between '02 and '06. Then I found these other kids, our buddy Joseph that we first saw in FamilySearch when we started this whole thing. There's his cute wife, Phoebe, and just started putting their kids in. Again, makes a lot of sense here. They got married in 28. This kid is christened in 30. This one's in 32. This one's in 34. So we're seeing the kind of pattern we would expect for a couple having children, and we're not seeing any weird inconsistencies. And then down here, we've got Thomas, the son of William and Sarah. So basically, I just kept going through that whole list of christenings and fitting them into the families where they appeared to belong. Another thing I meant to point out is I decided to turn the marriages green just because I wanted them to be easier to see. When they were black, just the whole thing was black, and it was like hard to see where I wanted to be inserting the kids. So that was a visual cue to me. And did I explain? Yes, I didn't remember if I had a slide on this. So after I moved all the marriage, all the birth, and all the burial information into my two new columns, then I had a boatload of empty columns. I didn't have birth information anymore because, well, the birth stuff wasn't really relevant. I was moving christenings. So I didn't need birth. I didn't need christening. I didn't need anything else because any other date and event columns, because they'd all been put into my new generic columns that I had inserted. So I got rid of all of those. And boy, did it make the spreadsheet a lot easier to read. So, and then you might laugh at this. I kind of laughed at myself. After I did that search and replace, because I didn't want that big long Willingham string, I thought, you know what? All these people are from Willingham. I did not find any exceptions. I guess it's possible that I could have. Maybe the search could have included a nearby parish or something. I don't know. But in this case, it didn't. So since it said that I'm researching in Willingham up here, I personally deleted those. You would not have to. But I thought it's just, for me, it's obvious they're all from Willingham. So I'm going to get rid of all those place name columns. So this is what we ended up with. The end result was we've got John Benton and Mary Harris with the children that follow logically. Then the burial ended up being for John, the dad, because it gave his birth information. And we could infer from his approximate age at marriage and the fact that there was no other John Benton close to that age that it was this guy. So we put in his burial, and that was further substantiated by the fact that Mary remarried afterwards. She remarried to James Few, and the marriage was late enough, 1833, that they were in the 1841 census, and some of the kids were with them. So it was obvious that this Mary Benton was the same as this Mary Harris that had married John Benton. And we got Joseph and Phoebe's kids. And some of you may have remembered or noticed that in FamilySearch, there were a lot more kids. Why are they not here? Well, because this family emigrated to the United States. So these were the only kids born in England. And then just the rest of the families, we just reconstituted them again using the parents as kind of an anchor point and then sorting the children beneath them. So that brings us to the end of our class today. That's how we created that spreadsheet that was shown in Cheryl's discovery experience. So just by way of making an end point, we just want to say that downloading and organizing search results from FamilySearch can help you to be more accurate and more thorough and make exciting discoveries because we found all those other families that probably would not have been on our radar if we hadn't cast that wider net and reconstituted the families. And it helps us to understand them. Thank you so much for sharing this beta experience with us today.